Hi guys, and welcome to Be Happy Cooking. We'll be making beef caldereta today. We're going to start off with some chuck roast that I'm using here. We're going to clean it up as best as we can, taking off as much fat as possible. Going to start cutting up our meat. We are going to be cutting them into bite-sized pieces. Now we're going to put the chuck roast pieces in with some water in the pot. We're going to be adding garlic and having it boil. This will be the first boil for the chuck roast. We're going to let it boil for about 30 minutes and then we're going to put some new water in. This is the second round of the chuck roast boil. We are going to add some clean water and we're going to have half an onion there to help tenderize the meat, and we're going to boil it for another 30 minutes. The meat is boiling nicely here. I'm going to be checking it with a fork, making sure it's fork tender, and also I'm going to be removing the beef broth that's been cooking in there, and we're going to be reserving that for later to use in our recipe. Now that the meat is fork tender, I am going to be removing the meat and putting it in this container here, and we're going to be reserving that to the side. We're going to be cooking our potatoes and carrots next. Have our bell peppers that we're going to be using. I'm going to rough chop them, and we're going to be using this a little later. Now we're going to be using one whole onion. We're going to be taking off the skin here, and then we're going to be dicing it up, and then we'll set it in the bowl for a little later. We're going to be chopping up our garlic. We're going to be finely chopping it, and we're going to also set this to the side for a little later. Now we have some carrots. I'm going to use these baby carrots that I had on hand. So this is all I had to work with. So I'm going to be using them. You can use the regular carrots. They're going to be just fine. And I'm going to half all these baby carrots, put them in the bowl, and use them for later. Now we're going to be using some potatoes. Going to be peeling them. And then as you see here, I'm going to be halving and then quartering, depending on the size of the potato. Just make them to nice bite-sized pieces. Now take your pan, we're going to add some olive oil, and we're going to start off with our garlic and then onion, and we're going to saute them for a few minutes until the onions are transparent. Alright, let's put our garlic in. We're going to start browning the garlic first. Now we're adding the diced onions. We are going to stir until the onions are transparent. Now we're going to be adding the meat back in with the garlic and onions and olive oil. And we're going to brown the meat until it has crispy edges. Now that the meat has some crispy edges, we're going to be adding some soy sauce, and you can add to your liking. And make sure to stir well. Going to keep cooking here with the soy sauce, the garlic, the onions, olive oil, and we're going to let that brown just a little while longer. I'm going to be turning down the heat just a little bit. I'm going to be transferring the meat over to a dish over here because we're going to be using that a little later. We're going to put our pot back on the burner here, and we're going to let it heat up again, and we're going to add some more olive oil, and we're going to start sauteing our potatoes and carrots. Our potatoes are looking pretty good. They are being cooked halfway through. Then we're going to be adding our carrots and also cooking them halfway through. We're going to be adding some salt, and then we're going to put our lid back on and cook it just for a few more minutes. Now we are going to be putting our meat mixture here with soy sauce, onions, and garlic, and we're going to be mixing that in with the potatoes and carrots. Now we're going to stir well until it's well incorporated. Now we're going to be adding our bell peppers, and we're going to stir well. And now we're going to be using some of that beef broth a little bit later. First, we're going to be adding some tomato paste. And I'm going to take 2 big scoops of that tomato paste right in there in the center. And then I'm going to be adding some tomato sauce, and that's 1 whole can of tomato sauce, unsalted. And I'm going to give it a good little mix there. And then I'm going to mix it all well, and then I'm going to add that beef broth. Now here I'm going to be using some pepper, and I'm going to be adding in about 1 teaspoon. Now I'm stirring well. I'm going to be adding some chili flakes, about 1 teaspoon. Also be adding a teaspoon of salt. Stir well. here we're going to be adding that beef broth that we saved, and we're going to mix it all in. And I think we're going to be using that whole bowl of beef broth. So that's about maybe 2 cups of beef broth. We're going to be stirring well and then adding the lid and cooking for a few more minutes. Now we're going to be adding some water, about maybe half a cup to a cup of water. Stir well, make sure everything is combined, and then we're going to be adding our next ingredient. Here is a little bit of a twist. We're going to be adding, instead of peanut butter, we're going to be adding almond butter. And here I'm adding about half a cup of almond butter, and it's going to add some great flavor to this dish. Stir well until it's all combined. We're going to be adding about 4 bay leaves. This is going to add some extra flavor to this dish. Make sure you're tasting your dish as you go. I'm going to be adding some little bit more salt. Also going to be adding some oyster sauce. This dish does have liver paste, but I do not have any on hand, so I'm going to be adding this ingredient, which is the oyster sauce, and it's going to enhance the flavor even more. Also, we're going to be adding some sweet pickled relish. This, believe it or not, is going to enhance the flavor, and it's going to make it amazing. We're going to let our stew simmer for another about 20 minutes until everything is cooked through and all those flavors are enhanced. And voila, there it is, beef caldereta. Enjoy!